It's time for us to begin with our class period this morning. Isn't it good to hear people talking? And even though it's far, it's still good to hear people talking. I thought about just delaying class 4 or 5 minutes, but I think people watching on live stream are going, are they ever going to start this? So it is wonderful to hear smiling faces, even if I can't see smiling faces. Just hear people visiting. It's just wonderful. And glad people have made it through this week safely with the ice and the snow and everything. Glad you were here this morning, whether you're in person or on live stream. We're just glad that you are with us. We have this morning and Lord willing next Sunday morning, and that will be the end of the winter quarter, if you can believe it, the start and stop quarter and everything else. But we are that close to being finished with the quarter that began way back in December. And I know if you've been coming, you're kind of tired of the same little quick little introduction, but I'm trying to give just a 10 or 15 second intro each week because we know we have people joining on live stream, and some, are just finding whatever services they can. And so this class began in December as a study of Christians and addictions, and then in the middle of January we switched over to a Christian and social media, and kind of 2 mini classes is what we've been calling it. And so this is the next to last week dealing with specifically with social media. And as we said several times, I know there are people who are here or who are watching who may not do a whole lot of social media or may think, that's not for me. Really, in a lot of ways, it's just a class on communication or a class on relationships with one another. We're just trying to use social media more as the specific application or area. But even if you're not involved in social media at all or very rarely, there are still tons of principles that need to be a part of our life to help us be faithful in all that we share with the world. And what we're going to talk about, we got a couple of sections we're going to try to deal with this morning. And the plan, if we can stay with the plan, is to do a couple of sections this morning. We may not quite finish the second one, that's okay. And then next week for our last session, what I hope to do is basically... it may seem kind of scattershot. What I hope to do next week is discuss some dangers and some good things. Kind of give both sides, both lists next week of social media and the Christian. Some things we be careful of, but also some ways it needs to be used to the glory of God. So the first section we'll talk about this morning, the first area, really deals with the subject of narcissism, selfishness, whatever you want to call it. One of the books I'm using for sort of the outlines of the lessons, the flow of thought of the lessons, has a whole chapter. It's called Selfie. That kind of describes it. We live in the selfie generation. You didn't know this a few years ago. Selfie was actually the word of the year. So it was the word that was the most common word, or the one that they felt was most summed up the world in which we live. You don't know what a selfie is? You want me to take one right now? It is where we take our phone or our tablet and turn around ourselves and take a picture of ourselves. If you don't think we do that all that much, 93 million selfies are taken every single day. So that tells us this is something that not just 12-year-olds with their first cell phone are doing this. We are all doing it. Just on Instagram, 1,000 selfies are posted every 10 seconds. Now, Leo, do the math. That's 100 a second, right? I like the 1,000. It sounds like a bigger number. But 1,000 every 10 seconds just to Instagram. That's not Facebook, not Twitter, not Snapchat, not TikTok, not anything else. Just on that one social media platform alone, 1,000 selfies are posted every 10 seconds, which means in the length of time it took me to take the sentence, even though I messed it up, over 1,000 were just posted to Instagram. And they actually can literally be dangerous. Did you realize that in 2015, more people died from selfie-related accidents than from shark attacks? That is actually a true statistic. I didn't make that up. Basically, and you can get the picture in your mind, people taking very dangerous selfies, hanging over cliffs, those sorts of things, and falling to their death. Or taking selfies in storms and getting hit by lightning, or taking selfies in moving traffic, and you can see where it goes. And more people died from selfie-related accidents that year then we're killed by sharks, which also tells us maybe sharks aren't all that scary. That's the other side of that, is that there's not all that many shark attacks, but still kind of a remarkable statistic that we are just horrified of that. But we will hang out over cliffs 20,000 feet off the ground and take selfies and think we're okay to make sure we get a picture of us involved in something. Now, there's nothing wrong with taking a selfie in and of itself. See what I did there? Sometimes I'm the only person there. I don't have anybody around, and I want to see myself in front of this building or whatever it happens to be. What we have to keep in mind when we think of anything we post on social media, whether it's a selfie or anything else, is that our motives matter. Our motives matter. We talked about this a little bit last week. We want to spend quite a bit of time on it for the next few minutes. Why are we sharing a lot of these things? And why are we sharing the things that we are sharing of ourselves and our friends, of our families, of whatever it happens to be? I cannot know for certain why someone else posts what they post. I can't know that for certain. But I can know why I post what I post. And if I'm not careful, it can become so people think a whole lot more of me than they should. It can stand, if we're not careful, in exact contrast to what Jesus said in Matthew 16, verse 24. It's also recorded in the book of Luke. Jesus said to his disciples in Matthew 16, 24, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." Luke's account, of course, adds the word daily, and take up his cross daily. But it's the first part of that command that really needs to come into play as we think about our motives for what we share with the world. Let a person deny himself. Am I really denying myself when it's all about how much accolade I can get, how many likes I can get, how many people share my pictures, how many people love what I share? Now, again, I could share something, and it can be liked and thumbs up and reshared a zillion times, and that's not why I shared it all. I thought it was a neat picture, or I was just trying to encourage people, hey, here's a family having fun, or whatever. So the outcome is not necessarily the bad thing. It's the motive. Is it just about me, or is it about encouraging other people? And it's remarkable sometimes that we never bring into play that very famous passage in Romans chapter 12. You probably can quote the passage, but if you've got your Bible, I want you to see it. To use Leo's phrase, put eyeballs on it. I want us to see it, and I want us to see it as we're thinking about this context, because Paul in Romans chapter 12 does not give an out to the commands found in those first couple of verses. This is supposed to be an all-encompassing passage for the entirety of our lives. Romans chapter 12, beginning of verse 1. "I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." Now, I know some translations differ a little bit on the wording, but the overall message is exactly the same. And you look at the concept in that passage of sacrifice, and Paul specifically mentions a couple of things that we are to sacrifice. We're to sacrifice our bodies. We present our bodies as a living sacrifice. And you may be able to see it on the screen, you may not, I'm not sure, but after the word sacrifice on the screen, in parentheses, I have the phrase, not focus on. If we are not careful, we can do the exact opposite of what Romans 12, 1 and 2 is commanding us to do with what we share on social media. How much of what we share on social media is not a sacrifice of our bodies, but a focus on our bodies? Look at me. Look at the physical accolades that I have. Okay, I'm going to do this. This is not cute. You look weird, okay? You need something. Okay, it's not cute. But what does it Share with the world. Focus on this. And I'm not going to do the other that's become very popular, and that is young girls sticking their tongues out. Parents, research where that came from. Research where that came from. And stop your girls from doing it. Please take 2 minutes to Google why that's popular. And you will not have your daughters doing it ever again. But so often we share on social media, and again, we can't question the motives of people who say, I ran a race in this amount of time, or I just bought a new outfit and makes me look good, or what. But I need to question my motives when I share those things. Is it just look how awesome I am? Or am I sacrificing my body? And then also Paul tells us to sacrifice our minds, our thinking. If all I do is just share on social media what's popular just because it's popular, am I sacrificing my mind for God? Am I even thinking for myself anymore? Or am I just sharing what I'm sharing because I'm just sharing it? Because everybody else is. Because everybody else thinks it's cool. Because everybody else thinks it's neat. Because my political party thinks this way, so I'll share it on social media. Or because this politician says it, I'll share it on... Am I even thinking for myself anymore? And am I thinking with God's mindset? Am I thinking anymore? Or am I just sharing it to be sharing it? And I'm going to cut to preaching for a second. Leo's preaching today, so I can get away with it. I don't care if you're 13 or 83. We've got people who worship here who need to quit parroting one political party or the other all the time. Because neither one of them have it right all the time. It needs to stop. Because what it really shows is, I'm not thinking for myself anymore. I'm going to let that party do my thinking for me. That party's got to be wrong because they've got that letter in front of their name. That party's got to be right because they've got that letter in front of them. Neither one have it right all the time. This is right all the time. And we need to start sacrificing our minds with what we share on social media, not what this politician or that party or that team or whatever happens to say, think, or do. And not just what's the popular meme or the popular cool thing to share. I need to be sacrificing my mind and thinking, is this something that portrays godliness and encouragement and love and teaching and grace? Or is it just cool? Or is it just something that'll stir up? Some people like to share stuff to stir things up. I'm sorry, but you're nuts. Okay? Either you got more time than I do to answer all the comments and stuff. Or you got thicker skin than I do, one or the other. But is this sharing peace? Or is it just stirring up trouble? Turn to 2 Timothy, chapter 3. There's a long list in 2 Timothy chapter 3. And we're not going to look at all the things, of course. In fact, we're not even going to really look deeply at any one of them. But in 2 Timothy chapter 3, if I've counted correctly, and I may not have, I counted 18, threats that Paul lists to faithful Christian living. I just want to read through the verses. And as we read through these, just ask yourself, how many of these 18 things have to do with things like selfish attitudes, selfish actions, those sorts of things? Beginning of verse 1 of 2 Timothy 3. But understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty. For people will be lovers of self. There's one for sure. I'm not going to count all of them. Lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. Avoid such people. Now again, I'm not going to go back to the list. You can do that on your own time. In fact, I encourage you to go back through those opening 5 verses. And just in your own mind, think how many of those things have to do with things like a selfish attitude or selfish actions. The spoiler alert, it's most of them. It's a huge chunk of them that have to do with either just a selfish mindset or actions that flow from that. I'm just going to say things like disobedience to parents fit under this because that's selfishness. That's where that comes from. A whole lot of them flow from the selfish attitude. But did you notice how Paul ended that as he wrote to Timothy? Avoid such people. How am I possibly following that when I'm resharing what they write on social media? Or when I constantly follow them and like all their posts on Instagram or TikTok? Or I make sure I don't miss any of their updates on Snapchat. When it's about me. It's supposed to be about God. And all of this has to do with building up ourselves and making sure that people think we are something great. And there's a lot of ways people like to defend this way of thinking. If you can't see it, there are quotation marks around the word defending, because a lot of people say, well, you're being too hard, because here's what I really mean. When I share these types of things, when I live this way on social media, when this is the profile I put out there, here's what I really mean. Some people say, I'm just being true to myself. Social media is where I can actually be me. I don't have to be, in some little box that my parents tell me to be in, or the society tells me to be in, or the church tells me to be in. I can actually be me. I am crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life that I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. I'm not supposed to be about being true to myself. I'm supposed to be about being true to God. And if the reason I'm living this life on social media is so I can be true to myself, I better check who I actually am. Who I'm supposed to be is crucified to myself and living to Jesus Christ. That's whose life is supposed to shine through me, not my own. And the more I live, the more it should be clear that what I'm sharing with the world matches up with the fact that I am crucified with Christ. That He is the one who shines or shows through me. Not look at how much I've broken out from the bonds of society or from under the bonds of my parents. Or look at how much I can push against the traditions of the church or what. I'm crucified with Christ. This isn't supposed to be about being true to myself. It's supposed to be about being true to the fact that I wear His name. That'll change a whole lot of what we share on social media. If we ever get that one verse completely into our mind and let it govern everything that we do, not just in our quote-unquote real lives, but in our quote-unquote digital lives as well. Some people defend this way of thinking by saying, well, I'm just telling the truth. And here's what they mean by that a lot of times. Not all the time. But sometimes they say, well, I'm going to share whatever I know about this person, about this party, about this politician, about this team, about this whatever. And because it's the truth, then I have the right to share it. I know the information, and so I'm just telling the truth. Well, yes, we should share it. We should say the truth. I'm not saying we should lie. But just because we know something, does that mean we have to go out and tell it all the time? And especially if the motive behind that is to run somebody else down, and especially then so that I look better. I'm going to look better by putting them down because I know this about them or about that group of people. In Proverbs 11 and verse 13, Solomon wrote, "Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered." Just because I know it doesn't mean I have to say it. If you have lived very long at all and dealt with people, which means you're human, you know things about someone that probably could destroy them. You don't have to be a teacher, a preacher, an elder. All you got to do is be a friend. Somebody has probably told you something that could destroy them. It could destroy their marriage, it could destroy their job, it could destroy something. And sometimes we think as long as I keep those things hidden, then I can share little itty, tidbits about, no. Why would I want to share something just to run somebody else down? I'm just telling the truth. sometimes the best thing to do is keep it quiet. And to work it out with that other person. To help them with something instead of running them down because of something. And I know I go to this a lot, but it's a huge deal. Just because I think I know something about a politician I might not like. Why do I get such joy about sharing it? So they look worse. What does that say about me? That I get joy when somebody else looks worse. It's not a good way to live. And then some people will defend this way of thinking by saying, if I don't promote myself, then nobody else will. I mean, there's this vast world. Adam, you notice there's a few people in this world, right? And I'm just living this quiet life here in Western Kentucky or Southern Illinois. Nobody knows who I am. And if I don't promote myself, who will? When did our lives become about promoting self? If I'm supposed to be a Christian, I'm supposed to be about promoting God, not me. And Christianity is supposed to be another religion, not a one religion. And sometimes we make it about just me. Look at what I've done. Look at what I've gotten to do. And again, we've got to ask the motives. You may think, well, I know what you shared about this the other day. We've got to understand motives. I'm just having us all look within ourselves to ask our motives. Why are we saying what we are saying? Sometimes we may share something that someone could see as self-promoting or whatever, and that's not how I meant it at all or how you meant it at all. I just thought it was a fun picture. I just thought, hey, this might encourage a family or might encourage somebody that I went to college with. I know is going to see this on social media. Whatever it is, that's fine. That's wonderful. But when I share something, it doesn't just need to be mindless and I'm just going to share it to share it. Why am I doing this? Is it about, well, nobody's going to notice me? Go back in your mind, and some of this will be longer before you're even alive, but from what you know from that time, if you're younger, go back in your mind, let's go way back in history, 30 years. Way back to 1991. Hootie and the Blowfish is on the radio. Milli Vanilli's losing the awards. Okay. Did you care at all what somebody on the other side of the world thought about you? Did you care at all what someone on the other side of the country thought about you? Did you care at all what somebody on the other side of the state thought about you? Did you care at all what someone on the other side of town thought about you? Probably not. Because there was almost no way for them to know. But now it becomes like, I've got to promote myself so people in California and Kalamazoo think I'm something great. How about I use the same tool to promote God so they think He's great? And so they see there are encouraging things in this world instead of look at me, look at me, look at me. So how do we overcome it? How do we overcome selfishness? Sorry. You got to get a dad joking at some point. People go, man, this is serious. This is serious. How do we overcome it? A few things. Number one is to don't be insecure. A lot of times the reason we do this is we're insecure. And when I glorify God and when I glorify others or help others, that's really what leads to security. Because you see, the more I promote self and just think about self, the more insecure I'm going to become. Because if I share something on Instagram and it gets 70 hearts and I'm, wow, that's just great. Look at that. And I share something the next week and it only gets 57. What's wrong with me? They don't like me anymore. There's nothing wrong with me. So what? But we become totally obsessed with it has to be bigger and more and expand more constantly. When if I'm constantly glorifying God and I'm constantly encouraging others, if no one likes the post, so what? I've glorified God and I know that's why I did it. If it happens to be shared or liked or whatever, that's a bonus. That's just extra. But if it becomes all about the statistics and the numbers, then it becomes very insecure because something's got to be wrong. I wore the wrong outfit. No, you didn't. The lighting was wrong. No, something was just wrong with me. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. A whole lot of this is driven not by pride, but by insecurity, which is a form of pride. But it's a very backward form of pride. It says I have to continue to get more and more and more, or something's wrong with me, instead of making sure we're glorifying God. Obviously, we'd overcome this also by moving the slides 800 pictures, by not making ourselves into an idol. We talk a lot about idolatry, and we make sure we understand that it's putting anything before God, not just the statues and the totem poles and all that kind of stuff. It's anything I put before God. I can put myself before God really easily. In fact, that's one of the easiest things to make an idol. We don't talk about it very much. That I become the idol. My reputation or my name or my following or whatever I want to put it. And social media will feed this like almost nothing else. Because I can look at the numbers. How many followers do I have? How many people like me? If I'm not careful, I become the idol. And it becomes all about just what do I want? What makes me feel good? Instead of what does God want? 3, we need to beware of pride. Pride is going to be one of two things. It's either going to make us a bully or a baby. Some people have pride where they become a bully. It's all about getting what I want, so I'm going to push people around. And sometimes this comes out on social media with the people who just sit there and just, they comment on everything. I'm sorry, but how do you have that kind of time? Get a hobby. Okay, do something with your, read your Bible, do something. But not only am I going to comment on everything, I'm going to make sure the way I word stuff, I'm going to make sure they know where I stand on this. They're going to know what I think. If you don't really care what somebody else thinks, why do you think they care what you think? And so then we're going to get on these Facebook wars. And we're going to start commenting back and forth. Yeah, but what about? If you ever see a comment that says, what about? Leave the conversation right then. Don't respond. Delete it. Unfriend them. Whatever you got to do. Because what just happened is we went from argument A to argument Q. And we're never getting back to A. All we're going to become is, yeah, but what about? These are not intelligent conversations. But we become a bully because I have to be right. And I want you to know that I'm right. Or pride can become, I'm a baby. Don't you feel sorry for me? Don't you feel sorry for everything that I've ever thought about and why all these things are wrong with everything? A, not everything's wrong with everything. And B, by sharing that constantly with the world, what's that say about me? I want you to feel sorry for me. And if that's all I ever want, and I never have sympathy for other people, that's a form of pride. Because it's all about how people can feed me and make me feel better. Because I need God to make me feel better. Not just random people on social media who can leave 8,000 comments about, and again, it's about motivation. But sometimes I'm convinced that's why some people, I follow some people on social media. Well, I used to. Don't anymore. That's all they ever shared was everything that was wrong with their life. I had a friend on Facebook that I'm not exaggerating, 6 and 7 times a day. It was what was wrong in a person's life. And I was like, I'm glad I don't live in the same town as you do. We have air. We can breathe. It's not that bad. I knew the person the way they live. I'm thinking, your life isn't that bad. There were some difficult things. I knew that. But this constant, just everything's terrible. No, everything's not terrible. This may be terrible. This moment may be terrible. This season may be terrible. But why am I continually going out to just random people in the world and begging them to feel sorry for me? It comes from pride. And also, I need to develop empathy. I need to be able to feel what other people feel. You may think, well, you just kind of went against what you just said. No, I'm trying. But empathy says, I understand people have difficulty. I'm going to do my best to put myself in their shoes. Now, what does that have to do with narcissism? It has to do with the fact that I'm not going to only share everything about me. I'm going to try to encourage other people. I'm going to comment or like or reshare or private message. A lot of people like to, in fact, that's what I usually like to do. I don't usually like to put comments out there because you can say, I'm praying for you. So, what do you mean by prayer? People are just mean, okay? People are just mean. They're terrible, okay? But I'm going to try to feel with them. 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 14, we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with them all. The key phrase in that was the one I paused on, encourage the faint-hearted. There are some people who are reaching out through social media. In fact, there's nowhere else they can reach out, which is truly sad. That's truly sad. There's something I can do. Even if it's pausing to pray and maybe just sending a private message and say, I just spend a moment in prayer for you. Or if I know them close enough, send them a text message so it's a little more personal. Make a phone call, whatever it is. And then it becomes not just about everything that I want, but how can I reach out and encourage other people as well? Again, it's about motivation. We have got to be far more careful about, is this all just about me? Or is it about a tool that I can use to glorify God and encourage other people? All right, let's transition from that to think about what we share, our profiles of ourselves. My Facebook profile, my bio on Instagram, whatever those things are called. What is it through my social media that I share with the world? Whether it's actually in the profile, in other words, where they're from, what education they had and everything, or just the overall impression that I give off through the things that I share. One thing we got to understand is Romans 12:3 says, "For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned." Now, that passage states one thing and implies another. It states very clearly that we can think too highly of ourselves. In other words, we can have arrogance. We talked about that several times in this class already. But by saying that we ought not to think more highly than he ought, it's implying that I can also think too little of myself and just let the world treat me like a doormat and just think I'm useless, I'm worthless, I'm nothing. Now, there's a fine line to walk as a Christian, isn't there? Because we fully understand without Christ, we're hopeless. We understand all these things. But we also understand that God has created us in His image, so inherently we have worth and value and dignity and all those sorts of things. So there has to be a balance that we share with the world, but that we also just simply believe in ourselves. It shouldn't become all about self-promotion, but also shouldn't be, I'm the most horrible person who's ever lived. No, I'm just me. I'm just me. But praise God, I am me. Because He's using me in certain ways, and that's a blessing. That's good. So there's a balance. But sometimes we share with the world a lot of things. Sometimes it's arrogance. Sometimes it's doormat. Sometimes it's not true. And what we share can and will be used against us in the future. Potential employers, the percentage they're now checking social media accounts back years and years and years is growing basically by the day. It's somewhere in the 70s. Some suggest even the low 80% range. They're saying if you apply for a job here, we're going to check not just what you put on Facebook yesterday, we're going to check what you put on Facebook from the day you signed on. Some of you are going home this afternoon deleting a lot of stuff. I'd like to change jobs, and I know what I put on there in 1997 before it was even called. It was just the Facebook at that time. It was a long time ago. What about college admissions? Huge percentages of colleges now are not just looking at your Facebook. They're digging through any social media account that has your name attached to it and seeing what kind of person are you online versus what kind of person did you put on your application. I'm a community leader. Yeah, I saw the pictures you took on spring break last year. I didn't know community leader. You're not getting my college. That's happening over and over and over and over again. And it's even being used by dating partners, potential people I'm going to marry. I mean, I'd kind of like to know what the person I'm thinking about marrying is sharing with the world constantly, wouldn't you? I'd kind of like to know what kind of person they are online versus what kind of person they are on a date together. And it's being checked constantly. Of course, some people are simply meeting online, but even if they know each other, they are going back and let me scroll back through their Facebook for about the last 5 or 6 years and just see what kind of person they present themselves to be with the world versus how they acted across the table from them at O'Charlie's. They acted like a gentleman there. They weren't a gentleman on here. There ain't going to be no second date. It is constant. And we're sharing with the world everything without thinking, hey, wait a second. This not just can, it's going to be used against me. In very real life, very difficult things to overcome. And the Bible has a lot to say about that. We sometimes call it reputation. Or we sometimes call it our good name. The Bible tells us to protect our good name. Again, we sometimes call it our reputation. Go ahead and turn to 1 Peter chapter 2. I'll meet you there in just a second. But while you're turning to 1 Peter 2, I want to read the verse from Proverbs. It's the one that's probably more familiar to us. Solomon said in Proverbs 22:1, "A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver and gold." Can I change what he said just a little bit? I hope you don't think this is just wrong or anything, but can we just change the last part of the first line? A good name is to be chosen rather than a great social media following. Again, that's not what he said, but I think we can make the application that my reputation is more important than just being cool on social media. But I want you to see something that Peter writes in 1 Peter chapter 2. We're studying through 1 Peter and teens in the Word. We spent some time on this verse, 18 months ago, it feels like now. We were in chapter 2, it was a while ago. But we had a really good discussion about this concept. Let's start reading in verse 11. 1 Peter 2, verses 11 and 12. Peter said, "Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles, to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable." Why? "So that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation." Peter does not just say, hey, have a good name. That would be enough. Solomon said in Proverbs 22:1, and it would be enough if Peter here just said, keep your name pure, keep your name honorable among the Gentiles. Paraphrase, among outsiders. Keep your name honorable there. But he goes on to say why. And one of the reasons why is if somebody says something about you, they can go, it's not who he is, that's who she is. I know them. They've never done anything. You're making that up. You are legitimately making that up because they don't live that way. Now, I may not agree with the way they live, but that's a good person. I may not even like the way they live. But they've always been honest. They've always been true to their spouse. They're a good neighbor. Can they tell that from what I'm sharing on here? Yeah, pretty good. But have you checked out their Twitter? Have you checked out their burner account? Have you checked out their second Instagram account that their parents don't know anything about but has a bio as their actual Instagram account? And by the way, we have some young people who have those, who probably just deleted them. Did you hear the nervous laughter? When people say things about me, I don't want it to be like, well, yeah, that's who he is in person, but you see him online. I want it to be, no, I know him from work, and I know him from Facebook. I mean, I don't agree with everything he says, but he's nothing but a gentleman. She's nothing but a lady. They've never been mean. And when they've done something, they've owned up to it. I saw them say that thing and say, you know what, I'm going to take that post down. That offended somebody, that hurt somebody. We have got to do our best, because if it becomes about just winning some battle or looking a certain way, then we're not protecting what really is most important, and it could be hurting our evangelism. And it could be hurting the reputation of the church, because that's what people are going to begin to think Christians are. They're one way in real life and another way online. One more thing, I think we have time to do it, and that is to don't overshare. Anybody got those friends on Facebook? Please don't raise your hands. You know what they had for breakfast this morning. You know what they were going to wear to church before they put it on. You know what they're planning for lunch already. You know what they had for dinner last night. And you know how they feel about all those things. And you know how they feel about everything you've posted the last week or so. It's like, you ever read a book? You ever go watch a TV show. The preachers give you information, but please don't share on social media. I just watched. We don't want it. We don't care. Okay? Look at what Solomon says in Proverbs Chapter 25. I love this passage. And as someone who has to use words for a living, it's one that I need to keep in my mind constantly. Proverbs 25, verses 16 and 17. If you have found honey, eat only enough for you, lest you have your fill of it and gross word vomited. Let your foot be seldom in your neighbor's house, lest he have his fill of you and hate you. What is Solomon saying? You can have too much of a good thing. You may have the coolest, most awesome life anyone has ever known in all of America, and you may have 18,000 people on Facebook who want to be your friends. But what does it say about you if you constantly share every last little thing? You can have too much of a good thing. There has to be a limit on those things. And as you see on the screens, the danger becomes that we begin to feel self-important. If I don't share today, people are going to wonder what happened to me. Sorry, but no, they're probably not. And if they do, they might have a problem too of constantly trying to figure out what's going on with so-and-so's life instead of living their own and trying to glorify God through their own life. James 1:19, of course, reminds us to be swift to hear and slow to speak. And I know that passage can very easily be taken out of context, and I just kind of took out of context a little bit. But the principle is there. The principle is found over and over in Proverbs as well, that there's something to be said for just sitting back and listening to other people instead of constantly sharing everything about ourselves. What that looks like is going to be different for different people. I know people, in fact, I'm thinking of people right now who are very lonely. And their outlet to the world is to share things on social media. And maybe we should help them, give them a call or whatever, and we do from time to time, but some of them live alone, and that's kind of their outlet. And so I may think they're oversharing, but in their mind, that's not their motivation at all. They're just trying to encourage people or help people, and it comes across as, okay, I've unfollowed everybody on Facebook with 12 people. I'm still getting 14,000 posts a day because this person's sharing 13,900 of them. When their motivation simply is, I'm just trying to teach and encourage and use it that way. I don't need to question that about another person. But I need to question myself. For me, once a week might be oversharing if the motivation isn't right. It's also possible that 4 or 5 times a day is not oversharing if the motivation is right. I need to ask myself, am I giving people just too much, even if it's of a good thing? Or is there a desire for, I can't wait till they post again, because when they put something out there, it's good, it's encouraging, it's helpful, it teaches me, makes me smile, makes me appreciate life. Wouldn't you rather it be that way than, I wonder if people unfollow me today because I got 75 updates? We need to make sure that we share appropriately, not just what we share, but how much we share. We'll stop there. We've got one more thing under that concept, and then we'll think about, Lord willing, next week, some negatives and some positives we draw us to a close. I know we're missing some people next week, Lord willing, who will be at CYC, but this will be available online afterwards, and hope that all of us who've been part of this class will take part in it that way if we can't be here on time, or in person, I should say. Thank you for being with us, and the bell's ringing right now, and we'll worship in just a moment.